Hello and welcome. We're talking tonight with Randy Adamsick. Randy is someone that many of you know from his work here in the film industry, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But we're not talking about movies or films. We're talking about kidney transplants because Randy had one back in 2016, and it was quite a dramatic prelude to the surgery, and he's doing well now, but we're going to learn a lot more about kidney transplants and organ donation. So I'm glad you could be with me today. I learned that 100,000 people in our country need a kidney because of kidney failure or potential kidney failure. 100,000, and only 6,000 transplants are being done a year. So that tells you what kind of need there is and what kind of problem we have here in terms of coming up with some solutions. Well, Randy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mary. It's only been 30 years since I've been on the air with you, so but it still feels like old times.
It does, doesn't it? Randy and I were co-hosting a show that he was one of the persons who started it, called The Screening Room. And we did movie previews and interviewed very
many famous people. Milos Forman, the great Czech director,
yes.
Keith Carradine, Alan Rudolph. Yeah, we had a lot of great people on this show, and and it was great fun. It was always fun being on with you. And the director was the late great John Spar, who was a wonderful person who passed away recently, who was just and taught me a lot about body language on TV.
Well, I loved working with you. For those who maybe know that you worked as the executive director of the film board, they maybe don't know some of the other jobs you held here before you moved and left us and went to Chicago. Right. But just give us a quick rundown.
Okay, the quick rundown is I worked for Al Milgram, who a lot of people know, at the University Film Society, and we started the very first Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival, which is almost 35 years, I think.
So co-founder here.
Yep.
Yes.
And then went on to run the Minnesota Film Board, and it was a time when Minnesota and a lot of other markets around the country, Seattle, Austin, Texas, we were all very busy back then. There was a lot of work leaving Hollywood, and it wasn't going to Canada yet. So we had about 70 films in the 10 years. Fargo, Grumpy Old Men, Mighty Ducks.
Some really big ones.
Yeah, those were our big ones. We had a lot of small ones too, but it was a great time. And I kind of moved to Chicago, and a lot of that work started going to Canada instead, and worked down there for the National Museum of Mexican Art, which is a great experience. And I retired last October from the Chicago History Museum, which was also a terrific experience. So.
And you also worked when you first went down there at the Art Institute.
Yeah, I ran the Gene Siskel Film Center, and it was a great job on paper, not so much in reality. And part of the problem was named Gene Siskel, but people really loved Roger Ebert, not Gene Siskel. And that was kind of what our show was based on. The Screening Room was the Ebert and Siskel. Right. There are many people doing similar shows, reviewing films at the time, but they were the standard. So, but it got me to, Chicago's my hometown, even though I spent 30 years in Minnesota, but it's, my grandkids are here now, and my daughter's here, so it's
you're
great to be back.
Back and forth quite a bit.
I'm back and forth, so now that I retired, I'm back and forth quite a bit.
So you may spot him at a movie or art event.
Certainly will. Certainly will. Yeah.
Well, when did you find out, Randy, that you had lousy kidneys?
Yeah. Well, it's a family disease, first of all. Of the statistic you mentioned, 100,000 people that need a new kidney, 85% or more have polycystic kidney disease, and it's just a disease that's very genetic. So it's in your family. Cysts start growing in your kidneys when you're young, and you hope you outlive it, and many people do.
So did you find out as a young boy?
No, you usually can't get diagnosed till you're about 30. But I really took it seriously when my brother was 11 years older than me. Got a kidney in 2001. And he got it at the Mayo Clinic from his daughter, and 18 years later, he's turning 80 next month, and he's doing great.
That's so encouraging.
So it was kind of on the horizon, but my doctors would always say, not necessarily will you have to do it, but about half the people in my family, including one of my daughters, has polycystic kidneys and a number of nephews. So we'll see what the next generation, because both of my older brothers and I all got kidneys at about age 66. So that's when our kidneys failed from polycystic.
And that's when you moved to Chicago, 2001, the year your brother had and you found out that
Right,
you might.
And so I followed it. I learned a lot about it, and you know, you feel like a kind of a ticking time bomb at times. Even though the doctor was saying, "Don't presume, don't presume," but and it usually isn't until about 2 to 3 years before your kidney fails. Then it happens pretty fast. So the 2 years leading up to my kidney transplant, when my kidney was, you need a transplant or a dialysis when your kidney function goes down to 10%. And so 2 years before that, I was probably still at 70%. So it goes quickly
like
at that point,
slope.
and then you know something's happening, and then you start feeling it, which is mainly you're really tired. When I came home from work, I'd go straight to bed.
And your work was demanding, though, so I suppose...
It was, and people now will tell me, they didn't say it then, but they said, wow, you really looked terrible back then, Randy, and
but
it's different now.
Not frequent urination or any of the kidney-related symptoms?
No, and there's nothing really painful about it. You just get very run down, and there's some funny side effects, but it's not a horrific, painful thing, but you just know that something's coming and something big is coming, and at 10%. And I was right at the time of my transplant, I was at 10%. If I hadn't gotten a transplant that month, I would have been in dialysis. So.
But you were trying to find someone to give you a transplant for how long? About 2 years?
Well, 2 years in thinking family, but then you talk to family and it's kind of risky. I mean, it would seem risky. My daughters were still young, so I didn't want to put them in that position. And it's a touchy issue in family. There's a lot of controversy involved with all
it's asking
with all
a lot.
of this. Well, it is asking a lot. It's asking someone to make a pretty heroic effort. On the other hand, it's a really safe surgery. The recovery rate is over
now, right?
Yes, and
which I was surprised to read.
So the donor's out of the hospital in a few days, and 95% of the time it goes really well. Sometimes there's a few side effects, but it's something. Well, that's why I'm here. That I'm actively working to see if more people would consider, because I got my life back, and I wake up every morning now thinking, well, I'm feeling great, and I could be going to dialysis this morning.
And dialysis, for those out there, and I didn't know much about it till I did more reading and thinking this week, thinking of your coming over here. It's not a good thing to go through.
It's very hard on the body, and I would have probably, like many people, been trying to still work, so I would have medical insurance. But I'm told, being on dialysis, switch chemodialysis, where they take all your blood out, purify it, put it all back in, takes about 4 hours. You have to do it 3 times a week, and you're really, I'm told, dragged out
I've heard that,
afterward. And so, it's a rough road.
And there's a fairly high statistic of not living a long time when you are on dialysis,
right?
Because it's just so hard on the body.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And it's it's an age-driven thing too. So they're often a little hesitant to give you a new kidney if you're over 70. So I'll take my case. In Chicago, if I hadn't had my donor step forward, who we'll talk about, I would have been on a waiting list probably for 7 years. And I was 66 at the time, and I would have been 73, and they probably wouldn't have given me a kidney. So I would have been out of luck.
Stuck with dialysis.
Yeah.
And
I think the average 12 years is the average length of someone surviving on dialysis. So
So there was real pressure to
and
find a
back
donor.
to the statistic you brought up. So 100,000 people, there's only 6,000 transplants a year. Most all of those other people are sitting there on dialysis, hoping they get a new kidney, and
So
many
that's
don't.
like, what, 94,000
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
I read that in terms of where money goes in our country, kidney disease accounts for about 1% of the budget.
Huh.
Education is 2%, so that gives you a sense of
Yeah,
how
it's a
big
big
a problem it
problem,
is.
and unfortunately, it's growing.
Oh,
and
is it growing?
And truthfully, my surgery for me and my donor costs about $300,000. Dialysis over time costs far more than that.
Really?
And so it's really a bad spiral, and that's why a lot of doctors, especially my doctors here at the University of Minnesota, are real activists of trying to get people away from just depending on dialysis as their future life. One simple thing you can do, which is to register in other states.
And
Illinois had
register early then, or before you're...
Exactly, because you can get a deceased kidney.
Right. They're not quite as successful, right?
Right. They're average 9 years for a deceased kidney and 15 years for a live kidney. But on the other hand, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the waiting list is 2 to 3 years. Now that I could have, and my middle brother actually got a deceased kidney from in Madison, had to drive up from Chicago to Madison in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow.
But, it's just, I wish more people would consider the alternatives and basically not be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of other diseases it's very different. People have cancer. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, think of it's very private. They tell you right away when you have, kidney failure. Just tell everybody you know, because there's many stories of people who step up who don't even know the recipient but want to do something great. And I hope some of our viewers, some of your viewers tonight really want to do something great, because I can tell you from my experience, like I said, it gave me my life back.
So it's, what bigger gift or act of generosity could one have, really, right?
I can't think of one.
There isn't one.
I can't think of one.
Well, just a little bit more about how you went about looking for a donor, because that had to have been stressful. Do you want to read?
Yeah, I would actually like to read what I
asked him if he would read what I call a plea.
A plea. This was January 1st, 2016, so 9 months before I found a donor. And I put this on Facebook with a really sad, sick-looking picture of myself. And I put, "I need your help and support in the new year. I have recently been informed that I will need a kidney transplant, and I am seeking a potential donor. Although it looked like I might be given a few more years reprieve, I am following in the path of my brothers, Tom and Ladd, with our family's malady, polycystic kidney disease. Both of my brothers received new kidneys at roughly my age, 65 then. And 15 years later, my brother Ladd is in great shape with the aid of his daughter Kathy's donated kidney. Ladd and Kathy are an inspiration. Over the course of 2016, it is likely that I will need a new kidney or go into dialysis." And that was the opening, and then I give a little more details. And it was an interesting response to this, because a lot of people considered, I don't think anybody else did get tested. You check with your family, but like I said, a lot of my family had polycystic kidneys.
Right, so they couldn't.
And then about May or June, I would say, an old friend, Dan Appleby, a filmmaker I knew from here in Minnesota. And I should say this now that I'm back in Chicago, I always felt down deep if someone was going to step forward, it would be in Minnesota. I mean, that's what Minnesotans.
Minnesota nice.
Yeah, and
very nice.
I really
in this
did.
Case.
And so when I came to get registered here in Minnesota, like I did in Wisconsin and Iowa, to just get on the list, the doctor said, well, do you have any possible donors? Anybody you think that we could contact? And I told them about Dan, and they said, get him in here tomorrow. And they reached out and checked him out. And first level is just a matching blood type.
Right.
Either has to be the same blood type, or blood type O will match anything.
And what blood type are you?
I'm A,
Oh, okay.
and he was an A.
Oh, okay.
And then there's all kinds of complicated chromosome antibiotic antibody matching that needs to be done. So even if you're the right blood type, it's still very long odds, like 1 in 100.
Height and weight have to be somewhat approximate, right?
And Dan, I should say this, he's just an exceptional person. I mean, not just gave me a kidney, but he was ready to donate. He had a friend, a mutual friend of ours, who was in need of a new liver 2 years before, and he wanted to donate a liver. And actually, he was 60, and for a liver after 50, they won't let you donate often. So
this was sort of in lieu of that.
Yeah, he was very steeped on all the issues involved. He'd kind of been through it once, and he thought about it. And I'll never forget when he came back from his first real checkup, when they said, well, we think that you're a match. And he said, well, I didn't say to myself, oh no, I have to do this now. He was up for it.
Okay.
And
wow.
I'll never forget being in September 29th that year, so 9 months after that Facebook post, we were in, and you always have completely separate medical care, a different doctor,
different room.
Yes. And but in the preparation room we were, side by side, and said, well, can I go see my donor one last time, and hopefully not one last time,
right.
Before they wheeled us in. And then they, of course, start with him first, and operation takes about 5 hours.
Wow.
And Dan was out.
For you're each under for
and then
5 hours?
He goes in first, he gets out first. Mine takes a little bit longer to hook it all up.
That's a long
Which I
surgery.
should say, how many kidneys do I have, Mary?
Well, you told me ahead of time. This is a question I would not have thought of asking, but yes, how many kidneys do you have?
I have 3 kidneys. In the old days, they would take out your old kidneys, and then they realized that really wasn't necessary, and they would put the new kidney where one of your old kidneys was. And now they just leave your kidneys in unless they're infected. And my new kidney, my 3rd kidney, is right here,
front and
which
center.
no one knows. So it's always a little kind of a party game that I like to play. Where's my 3rd kidney?
Well, yeah, I had no idea, so that is a little strange.
Yeah, and it's makes me kind of a little Frankenstein-like to have the extra organs.
So you're feeling, I mean, you look wonderful. So you're feeling.
I feel absolutely great.
Back to how you felt before you had the fatigue and.
Yeah, and I have to take, as all kidney recipients do, anti-rejection drugs the rest of my life so that my body won't reject the kidney. And once you get that stabilized, the outlook's very good. And little by little over the last 2.5 years, my stamina has actually come back. And I kept working because I wanted to make sure I was healthy when I was able to retire. And then I retired last October. So, I'm luckiest guy alive, perhaps.
Do you have that sense of, well, I mean, what you just said, I guess, answers my question, that sense of a renewed love of life?
I don't know if other people, like, you hear stories of people, almost die in surgery or have some other experience where they're even legally dead. And well, I feel kind of like that. I feel, it really is. Yeah, it's a different way to look at life.
Do you kind of not sweat the small stuff as much? Is that part of the deal?
I think that's probably true. I do. I just want to enjoy. I just appreciate every day more. And I'm here. I get choked up in this. Watching my grandkids grow up.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I would have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
So
not at least the long time you're going to get now. Is there any study that says that once you've had one kidney, well, both kidneys were really failing,
yeah,
obviously, but
polycystic effects, and again, that's the most common.
could you have another kidney transplant is what I'm wondering.
People,
if you needed.
well, if people get kidneys younger, I mean, I've met people, since I've been out with the National Kidney Foundation and talking about these things, I mean, I've met people that have had 4 kidneys in their lifetime.
Really?
And
So if you're,
I don't know where you get 4 kidneys. I mean, it's really, but yeah, because it is a limited life expectancy of the new kidney. But some, there's stories of people having kidneys 30 and 40 years. And
your brother's good
doing
success
great.
is
Oh, absolutely
encouraging,
great.
isn't it? Just
yeah,
thinking
it
of
is.
your own family
Yeah.
genetics.
Yeah,
and
and that really, and that really paved the path for the whole, I knew my daughters, unlike him, my daughters couldn't donate, but I knew that there was hope. And,
Yeah, and
and
hope
to
is
watch him
so
come back
important.
and have a great life since then.
So for someone out there who's listening and thinking, wow, I want to learn more about this, what are some of the key things as a kidney donor? And kidney donors, I mean, kidneys are the one big thing that we need donors for, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
Of organ
of all the
donations, you hear
organs.
about liver and heart, but I think over 85%
Yeah, I was surprised.
of the donations done are kidney, and it's really because polycystic
Is
kidney
that
is
big
so
of a
common, and so
problem?
the main research that I think, in the meantime, we just have to find donors. I mean, it's the only way to address the problem. In the long term, there's some interesting work, some down at University of Chicago, of prolonging, making the cyst grow slower, so that and that way you can outlive it, as many people do already. But if you can just slow down the growth of the cysts,
So
they
sort
won't.
of-
They just
that'd be
just clog
wonderful.
up your kidneys when it's time, and then you have no choice. But that's by far, it's big numbers, and of all the donations, organ
So
donations.
until that really
Yeah.
kicks in, what are some of the key things to be a donor? Is there age limit?
70 is sometimes a limit. Others will go beyond, especially if if a donor is a relative or a good friend said, I know I'm older, but I have a
I'm
perfectly
healthy.
good kidney, and I would like to donate. You have to be the right, blood type and antibody, of course, and they really give you a lot of. I mean, talking to, do you really want to do this? This
Sure,
is,
the
I mean,
psychological
to
part
put
of it.
yourself in a, it is, like any big surgery.
There's some risks, sure.
There are definite risks, and
How long does the donor feel kind of, off or weak after surgery?
it's
I'm sure it
it's a
varies,
speedier
but-
recovery than the recipient, but still, and sometimes you'll hear a lot of donors say, I wish my care lasted longer. And I know my donor Dan felt that way, that he should have had more continuing care. It's kind of, sometimes they feel a little cast aside, and all the care, like I had
All the
weekly blood
attention goes
tests
to
for
the-
2 years, and so they're following me like a hawk, But sometimes it is harder for the donor, and that can be a negative. The other thing that is that, and my doctors here at University of Minnesota I think are real pioneers on this, are really wanting incentives for people to donate. For instance, what if my donor Dan got medical insurance for the rest of his life? I mean, Americans are very, very opposed to people paying for kidneys. In other countries like
said-
India and Iran,
Right.
people do it, and my doctors had very different views than most American doctors on this. They said, well, I know people in India, the kid gets $10,000, goes to college, and is fine, and So there's a lot of debate
So some ethical
about
decisions
it. But I
here
think
to
what
make.
people, at the very least, in Europe is much better, as usual in Canada, of creating incentives like free medical care or tax credits, or you don't lose your job when you donate. That's a bill now in the legislature so that businesses get tax credits if they allow their employees to be a kidney donor. So.
Well, I wish we had a little more time, or a lot more time, Randy, to go into more detail. I'm getting the wind-up signal. We want to give you some resources. So first of all, the University of Minnesota here, Randy says, is top.
Absolutely.
And I want to give you their phone number. It's 612-625-5115. And then there's a website, too, that we're going to put on the screen. And I'm going to just let you look at that, but it's srtr.org/transplant Centers University. That'll be on the screen. And then if you are interested in being a living donor or learning more about it, go to www.organdonor.gov. And of course, we all know when we get our driver's license.
Oh, well, that's the
renewed,
first thing that people can do, is to sign up on your driver's license.
Easy thing to do that.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And
and
lot
that's
of people,
and that's what I'd say. If you want to do something but not make the big sacrifice, that's something that everybody can do, and it would really help with the problem.
That's a huge thing. And do you have any sense of how many people are checking, I want to be a donor, on the driver's license?
Minnesota, I think, does pretty well. I believe it's about 60%, but it could be
better.
It could be better, and a lot of
Just like
states are not. A lot of states are a lot less than that.
Okay.
So in the Illinois, that is the big push. For years, people have been pushing check the box.
Well, that's the easy one, and also think hard about what Randy's told you, and look into being a living donor too. Well, thank you so much for coming down.
It's
to work
great
with
to see you,
again.
Mary, and thank you for letting me talk about this, because it's important.
Very important. Thank you for being with us. I'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.